Welcome back. It's still the morning brief right here on Channels Television, and we're about to dive into a discussion on the state of the polity. But before that, let's bring you up to speed yet again with the news that just came in this morning, right after we were looking at the ruling by the Industrial Court restricting workers from going on strike. Of course, this came on the heels of the industrial disharmony that has been the case in the last couple of weeks in the Federal Capital Territory between the leadership of the FCT and the workers. And just at about midnight, a consensus came through, and it was an outcome of a conciliatory meeting with the Honorable Minister of the FCT. In the statement signed by a joint leadership of the TUC and the NLC, Comrade Benson Upa and Comrade Nat'l, the resolutions are myriad. One, all complaints presented by JOAC, that's a joint action, members were taken one after the other and fully addressed. And also, the Honorable Minister assures organized labor of mutual respect and sustained engagement going forward. And it was agreed also that arising from the strike action, no worker shall be victimized in any manner. And all outstanding cases at the National Industrial Court shall be withdrawn immediately. So that's an assurance documented that going forward there will be stability in labor relations with the leadership of the Federal Capital Territory going forward, and that's assuring. And so let's look at other matters in the polity now, from internal party politics to concerns about a one-party state, and of course, the arrest of suspected coup plotters who, of course, will face the consequences. Myriad issues to look at this morning. And joining us is Professor Anthony Kila, who joins us virtually today on the program. Of course, Professor Kila is a professor of strategy and development. He joins us right here on the program. Professor Kila, of course, your work is cut out for you today on the program. I'd like to start with party politics. And right now, if you look at the political map of Nigeria, you see the dominance of the ruling All Progressives Congress. Now, it's an unusual dominance from what we had known of our 27-year democratic journey. I doubt that there has ever been a time where we had one party having more than 3/4 of the states of the Federation. Have we arrived at this point from where you stand through legitimate party relations, appeal and equitable sharing of the dividends of democracy that makes a party so appealing to not just the electorate now, but the political elite?
Well, I mean, good morning. And when you introduce the term legitimate, one must quickly point out that, yes, it must be legitimate, otherwise it won't stand. That is technically speaking. It shows you that we have a system, a constitution that allows party members and public office holders to cross carpet without any consequence. It's a kind of legitimacy that perhaps needs to be at least viewed intensively, if not reviewed totally. So that's the kind of legitimacy we have there. In terms of the method, so that's technicality. In terms of politics and morality, I have some doubts. I think that the idea that you contest election against a platform, against the people, and then in 2 years you change your mind so much that you not only work or collaborate with them, or you have to cross carpet or effect, as we say in Nigeria, I think it's a worrisome situation. It's worrisome on two levels. Number one is that it shows something about character, about these politicians, these public office holders, that they cannot preview situations for, 24 months ahead to know where they stand. Let's assume that all of a sudden the leader of the APC, the president and the presidency and APC members become miracle workers and they solve Nigerian problems. The fact that the opposition people joined them tells you that what binds the people in opposition is not very strong. In chemistry, you talk of equivalent bonds or covalent bonds. The kind of bond they have is so easily divided because they truly do not share ideas, let alone ideology. But that's the kind of politics we play. Maybe not a big deal. From the other side, I'm sure the people applauding their cost capital will be saying it is because the government is doing so well that they tend to do so. I do not believe the government is doing that well. That will make people, cross paths easily. They're doing some good things, a lot of things, but they're not the worst government. They're the best. I did not really enjoy it. But one thing I must say, and I want to put this on record, which I find vexatious to say the least, is for people to say the reason why they're joining is because they can work better with the center. It might sound commonsensical. I think it is pedestrian, and I think it's against the kind of institution that we need to build in a country that wants to develop.
Yeah, Prof, it's an interesting development we've seen. So for the record, I think it was PDP under Olusegun Obasanjo or Jonathan. I think it should be Jonathan Olusegun Obasanjo. They had about, let's call it roughly 27 governors out of the 36. And this time we have about 31 because if you take out Anambra, take out Abia, Zamfara, Adamawa, and Bauchi, I think those are the only ones that are not in the APC. The rest are APC parts. So this is the biggest in terms of domination, about 30, 31 states already in the fold of the APC with the excuse of aligning with the center, a statement that I particularly hate because it doesn't make any sense to me. But it's their position, is within their discretion. So let's talk about what is a driving force. I've argued to the effect that self-preservation, which is their legitimate right, is one. Subservience to power, which is access to power, is a major driving force. So we're no longer building political parties. And I've challenged even the APC to say they are not a political party yet until they lose elections. Because if after barely 10 years, a party that ruled for 16 years with that level of domination in terms of state can barely survive just 2-3 election cycles, it tells me that maybe it wasn't a party after all, it's an SPV. So help us understand how we can navigate this path to begin to build parties where we're driven by something beyond money. We're driven by something beyond subservience to power. We're driven by something beyond self-interest.
Well, I think, okay, let's start with something. People don't have to lose elections. The political party, that's just your own kind of formation. The SDP has never won election. They've been there forever. The PRP never won election, at least on the federal level, and they continue. I think those are the two oldest political parties in the country at the moment because they've been there way before these new parties we have. I think it's a human factor. What we're dealing with is human beings. We're dealing with, boys who we call men, dealing with followers who we call leaders. I find that we have a political class that is not up to par with what it ought to be. And you can see this when you look around you. So let us juxtapose the process with which leaders are made and juxtapose that with the real issues that leaders need to face. When people get elected into office, they're going to have to deal with fiscal policies, monetary policies, defense, security. By that, I mean matters of war and death. They're going to have to deal with environmental issues, diplomatic issues. These are medical issues. These are issues that require soberness, thoroughness, that requires people to be very calm, very detailed, almost insular in their thing. These are very highly cerebral activities that they need to deal with because it affects the lives of many. When we look at the process of emerging as leader and the way leaders behave in this country, what you find is a group of dancers clowning around, diving and gisting, and they're always unduly happy, always this merry-making bunch of, I don't want to say any offensive word, but the point is, when you look at those kind of people, you realize that it is impossible for them to stick to their guns because they've been gone through a thorough conviction. So there's no surprise that therefore, once the kitchen is a bit hot, they're going to leave the place. And we have to be very careful to say this thing because members of the opposition, and this is the point I really want to make seriously, members of the opposition have been very lazily, very easily tempted to blame the government of the day for coercing, manipulating their members to join government. I think it is in the interest of the government of the day to have more as much supporters as they can have. But the real battle is for the opposition to choose, and all parties to choose men and women of substance that will not easily be swayed. You need to build up character. But to do that, you need a vision that binds you, and you need to take things very seriously. So it is not a problem of one side. It's a general problem. And let me add people who are not in power. Let me add our intellectual and moral elite, thinkers and clergy, who do not see that this display of shallowness is something dangerous for development and governance. I think we need to denounce it so that we can get people who can stick to their guns, not for stubbornness' sake, but for consistency. We need to start to consider seriousness as an issue in elections, not just popularity.
So, Prof, let me try to ask this as simple as I can. Is the problem the APC, or the politicians who choose not to stand their ground, or those who just want to be in circulation by all means, or maybe the Nigerians who have handed over their agency to government solely, or at least the politicians, to use it as they will without any form of check or balance, or at least putting your eye, as they say in local parlance? What exactly is the problem, Prof?
Well, I think you framed it very well, and the question is all of the above. So we were going to write, a pamphlet on why we are this way. Those things that you've listed, will be subsections of short chapters of everything that we're talking about. The way we are this way is because we, the people, have totally delegated the agency to government in a sort of vicarious living. The way we are this way is because the people who step up to political system are the ones I've described: dancers and clowns, divers and gisters, jolly good fellows who do not fit the bill of the seriousness of governance. We are this way because we've allowed the system to fester that does not check this kind of thing. Look, if you take a look at the Association of Pharmacists or medical doctors or even carpenters and designers and farmers, and so it is not a place where you go and jest, because the matters they have to describe are very serious issues. If you're looking to employ board members to a bank, to a water corporation company, in the application you don't go with drums, you don't go giving high fives and dancing and making jokes. You don't hire a band to go around with you because you want to discuss water security or environment. But the people who we put there are people who do all this. So as a result, I don't want everybody to be as boring as me. People have a right to be happy and make merry. But my take is that if you're dealing with serious issues, it's better you appear serious. And I want our viewers to look at themselves, and I indict most people watching us today because they're all guilty of it. We are all guilty of it. Because you watch these people and you laugh. Let me tell you, and madam watching me today, that you're guilty of allowing this behavior. We need to start frowning at undue behavior so that we do not get undesirable results. So to your question, you've ticked a lot of the boxes. We can add one or two more. One thing we should add to it is the process that allows such to happen.
Speaking of processes or systems that allow things to happen, let's get into another part of the conversation, which all seems connected to this in one way or the other. and it's the foiled coup attempt happening in a democracy that has, well, debatably matured 27 years, in 27 years since we exited the last republic. Now, what is quite noteworthy is the views put out by the Minister of Defense, who happened to be the CDS, while this was discovered and investigations began for it from about last year. What, from where you stand, should be the lessons, the key takeaways from this foiled coup attempt? How could this have happened, decades after the last coup? And what should the political elite be taking away from this experience?
I think politically, it's three or four things, and they're not new things. Number one is that, generally speaking, there's always a coup lurking in the corner. It could be a military coup, it could be a civilian coup, and by the way, it could be a coup by the government of the day itself. So the civilian coup, or let's start from the military coup. We're used to the kind of coup where tanks roll out, and I'm going to say boys, men in khaki come out to say fellow Nigerians are taking over because of this and because of that. This is a revolution or this is a reformation. That's the kind of thing we're used to calling coup. But there's also civilian coup, in which sometimes the people in power decide to violate the constitution or subdue the institution for sectarian benefit or personal interest. And that is also a coup. Sometimes it's the opposition, doing the same thing. So there's a military coup, there's a civilian coup, and the coups are always locking. So that's one thing that people in power need to realize. The other thing they need to realize is that coups are possible where institutions are frail. Coups are possible where there is a reason for coup to come up. And those reasons tend to be bad governance between government and people. It tends to be a sloppy system that makes government look weak, or if the government of the day can justifiably be described as betraying the cause of the nation or the bond of the nation. So the way to do it, the real answer is good governance and vigilance. Good governance, vigilance, let me add respect of the institution as well that builds it. So those are the lessons. You can't say, you can say it actually. You can say, people should start doing coup. But you cannot expect them to believe you or to obey you. What you need to do is to make it unnecessary and as impossible as that can be.
Well, interesting. Let's talk about what is played out. Maybe that's why we say we're being through all of this. So let's move from national security issues to maybe back to the Electoral Act amendment that is going on. In fact, there are conversations whether or not we may have to adjust the election timetable even slightly further, given the fact that the Electoral Act was meant to be ready before the timetable is out, I think next month or the month after, so that we can start preparing for the next cycle of 2027 general elections. But as we speak, that is not ready yet. When Nigerians will go out to vote, we started a conversation today from a local government level to this earlier before we brought you in. When Nigerians go out to vote, because we're talking about electronic transmission of results, I think that Section 60 is going to be part of the changes that we'll be seeing. One of the things we want to see is also post-election litigation ahead of inauguration, so that whoever is inaugurated also knows that I don't have encumbrances in terms of going to court. So these things will help, manage our democracy, because our democracy is such that we still have a lot of post-election litigation, sometimes higher, sometimes lower. But for you as an intellectual, are you concerned about the quality of people that we, because we are all in it together, are putting in power?
Oh, yes, I am concerned with that concern in various ways. I'm concerned that whether they have debts or not, it is clear to me that those who put in power tend to have a penance to display their shallowness rather than their debt. They have a penance to display their, joviality rather than soberness, generally speaking. So that's the problem. But this specific issue of not being able to fulfill their duty on the electoral reform, and that might lead to a postponement of the election and adjustment, as you put it, that's our political correct language you use there. Let me say very clear that it is an indictment of our political class, the parliamentary arm of government in particular. It is a failure because for two reasons. Number one is that the electoral process, voting in particular, is perhaps the most visible part of the democratic process. And it should be part that should be taken very, very seriously and be given priority at all times. The fact that you do not do that, shows incompetence or mischief. The election date is as certain as Christmas Day. It's not something. It's something that you can predict. If the world exists, you can predict it 50 years' time from today. So for somebody to meet that date, it just tells you, very much about the kind of people who would not ensure that that date does not go unpassed, unchanged. There's something about it that, little things matter. The next little thing tells you why we get big things wrong. If you cannot keep to time, you cannot meet deadlines, if you cannot respect the most sacred, the most impactful, the most visible part of the process that elects you and sustain you, then surely there is something wrong with the way you operate. And I say this without indicating one party or the other. Actually, I'm not even talking to politicians. I'm talking to we the people, as you rightly put it, to have a rethink of how we consider politics and politicians.
Absolutely. Rethink for everyone. Amid everything, the most important question would be how much of democracy is being saved? And you could ask that to the people. It's an interesting conversation and one that we'll keep having, perhaps, with another panel, this time of the electorate. But we must anchor at this point. And thank you very much for coming on the program. We've been talking with Professor Anthony Kila, Director of the Commonwealth Institute. Thank you so much for coming on The Morning Brief.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
We'll pause for a moment now. When we return, we'll bring you something soft on a Tuesday, but it promises to be interesting. Stay with us.